to respond to your specific question, the Signal survey, and look, I'm very familiar with the work that the group Signal does. They do great work. It had a couple of very key blind spots. First off, as you mentioned and articulated, they did not mention at all the implications of the bill itself, right? And there's some very serious implications that most folks would care a lot about, that municipalities no longer have ultimate control over what happens from a planning and zoning perspective. But two, and most importantly, the word housing unit is a very key phrase separate from apartment. An apartment and 1900 apartments is different than housing units, because I would assume that if a typical voter would hear housing unit, they may assume, oh, there's 50, 100 units that are relative and specific to the headquarters and specific to the employees. That's not what's happening here. It's a full-fledged department that may or may not have some employees from Axon, but are also going to have a significant amount of people that have nothing to do with Axon that are just on the property. So it's just another 2,000 apartments, which would be one of the largest planned apartment complexes in the city of Scottsdale, which is why the city and voters in the city oppose it. When you frame questions, it matters as pollsters. We know that. I'm not saying anything sort of bad about the poll in its substance. I don't know enough to comment on that. I have no reason to believe Signal's a top-tier pollster, but the way that they phrased the question very clearly was exceptionally favorable to the development and exceptionally favorable to what they're trying to do, and very disconnected from the actual bill, which is fundamentally changes the way that the average citizen in a city engages and interacts with planning and zoning in that city.
So I was under the impression, and I've been following this for a couple of weeks now, that these apartments or the dwellings would be specifically for Axon employees, but you're saying anybody could come and live in this apartment complex.
Unless they have changed it in the last number of hours, it is a well-known fact that some of the dwellings can be used by staff, but not all of them. It will not be Axon apartments exclusively for Axon usage. The numbers that I've heard cited is a couple hundred out of the 1900s. So the preponderance of this complex are just going to be apartments. It's a business move. It's if you're a business like Axon, and North Scottsdale is a highly profitable rental market. That's why they're doing it. This isn't just to fulfill the need of their specific employees. Another thing to note, being very familiar with that area probably has one of the highest numbers of apartments to citizens or apartments to square mile of any part of the valley or any part of Scottsdale. There's a significant amount of apartments off the 101 in that general area. And 1900 would be disproportionately large. But yeah, it is fairly well known that it would be able to be used by anyone. Again, unless they choose to limit it, I suppose, in the coming months for whatever reason. But that's not been the commentary and the messaging that they've used up until now.
One of the things that I've learned about polls, I've had to do a couple for businesses and nonprofits that I've worked for in the past, is when you do a poll, you're also aiming to inform people, to educate them. So you say, XYZ is the information, and then how do you feel about XYZ? Do you feel that really the biggest chunk of this proposal was left out of informing people in this poll?
I do. I mean, yes, it was designed to be very broad, very high level. It was designed to use phrases like housing units, which makes it seem like it's only for employees. It didn't give the full scope of the project, and it definitely did not give the full scope of the bill that is moving through the legislature. Again, that's not it's not a nefarious commentary. That is just a candid commentary and assessment with the survey questions that were released publicly by the organization.
Would the chamber have paid for this poll? Who paid for this poll?
I don't know. That's another thing that is typically released. I know the chamber did a release, but I'm not sure who paid for it. I don't know that was released in the top lines. That would be a question. I wonder on the documentation that you found if that was made known. I'm not sure.
One of the things about this legislation would be that it's not just Scottsdale. So I live in Goodyear and we're only 15% built out. We have numerous apartments and warehouses at this point. What happens in Scottsdale won't stay in Scottsdale. I mean, this could affect the entire state as far as, stripping municipalities of their zoning
So
regulation. Feel that way?
So this is a very interesting point that you made. The original version of the bill very clearly applied to everybody. Um, it essentially just recategorized the way planning and zoning was considered in state statute, and so it made it undoable to referendum, to send it to a referendum. The new bill, as far as I understand, is actually uniquely applicable, at least in this current moment, exclusively to Scottsdale and Axon because of the vote, because of the citizen thresholds that they put into it. So the new strike everything amendment that passed unanimously to the International Affairs Committee, I think may only apply to the Axon project. I don't know that it could be applicable now. The mindset, to your point, is going to be applicable everywhere, but now it is a brazen attempt by the company to push forward legislation that is uniquely specific to them, uh, against the will of Scottsdale voters, by the way. Every single legislator in the city of Scottsdale opposes this for obvious reasons. But if you're not in Scottsdale, you're in Goodyear. You just mentioned. Well, maybe it's not as applicable to you. You have a different dynamic with apartments. Scottsdale is obviously very differently built out than the city of Goodyear, the city of Buckeye, or Far West Valley, or what have you. So that matters. But yeah, this new strike everything amendment was very, very peculiarly worded to be laser focused on this issue in front of them, and almost only apply to Axon.
Is this rare?
Yes, I would say so. Yeah, it's not rare for a company interest to be able to want to push a state statute. It is rare that a bill is so narrowly crafted to apply to that. And the other thing that's rare is retroactivity. It's not often that you pass a bill and says, "Oh, this is going to apply a year back," because then obviously it would apply to Axon. I think people would maybe have less consternation, even though there still would be opposition to what is the role of the voter at the municipal level and being able to determine their planning and zoning efforts. But this one doesn't just move forward; it's retroactive. Because one of the key parts of why people in Scottsdale, and as a Scottsdale resident, I'm frustrated, is this. They've attempted to pass this at the local level for months and months and months, and they were stopped every time. They only got it passed after the November 2024 election. Why? Because the mayor who just got unelected, one of the council members who just got unelected, and one of the council members who didn't decide to run for re-election, and the two that got unelected, mainly they got unelected based on their stances on apartments and development. They passed it in their lame duck session. This was not an act of the new council. It would never have gotten passed. They passed this in the smidgen of time, 2 months' time, that I would consider a lame duck session, from the election to the new installment of the new council and mayor, and that's when they were able to get it through. They had attempted for a year and a half. Again, all of these facts are conveniently left out of the narrative, but people in Scottsdale that have been following this for a long time, we know what's happened and we know what is happening. Now it's our job to obviously inform folks in other places.
Last week I think a lot of jaws dropped when there was a 8-0 in favor of this to move forward. And the lawmakers said that essentially they were, advancing this legislation in order to possibly work on a compromise. What was your reaction to that 8-0 vote? And is compromise possible?
I think compromise is always possible, but both you have to be a fair broker in that. They've been negotiating with the city for a long time. Up until this point, they seemingly are refusing to just build the headquarters, which I don't know that anyone's opposed to. The big consternation that we have is with the 1,900 apartments. So are they willing to compromise on that? I think that's left to be seen. It's probably not a good tactic, though, that they have been publicly picking fights with elected officials, not necessarily at the city level, but at the legislative level. So that's likely not a good place to start. But I think compromise is always possible. I know that there are leaders in Scottsdale that want to have conversations, and conversations are happening ongoing. But the apartments are a big deal. Compromise doesn't mean that you just get your way and you try to bully people into giving you what you want. That's not compromise. So I hope that this vote is viewed as a measure to compromise, but we'll see. I think I'm a big believer in is you have to walk the walk. So let's see if they walk the walk moving forward.